The ecology of a forest can be incredibly complex. Every plant and all of its body parts provide biological resources for other organisms. Small animals scavenge and maybe store the seeds, and larger herbivores graze on the shoots and the leaves. On a smaller scale, insects of all kinds live all over the three-dimensional vegetable matrix of the forest, in every niche, from the soil to the canopy and everything in between. Symbiotic relationships exist between plant and pollinator, and between plant and fungus, and just this alone, the mycorrhizal fungi integrating into plants, is incredibly complicated and hugely influential in forest health. Some forests can't even exist without their fungal symbiotes. And of course, there's also the symbioses between the plants themselves. And this is just scratching the surface. All of my forest episodes from the Biome series barely scratches the surface of the true depth of forest ecology. Now, a new study has been published in the journal Cell, and it's interesting because it provides an observation that defies our intuition, with ecological implications of a forest that behaves less like a collection of individuals, but instead more like a vastly complex, interconnected superorganism. The observation that they made involved a tree stump. But what is it about the tree stump that defies our intuition? When you think of a tree stump, like the remains of a tree snapped apart by the fury of a storm, or a flat-topped stump cut by a team of loggers, you probably think that the tree is dead. The stump has no leaves, so clearly it can't conduct photosynthesis. It can't produce sugars, and it can't grow. It's dead, or at least, it's effectively dead. That's the intuition, but it turns out that that intuition can be wrong. The research team, led by Sebastian Lusinger and his colleagues from the Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand, were hiking through the rugged forests to the west of their home city, when they noticed the stump of an Agathis australis tree, or more commonly known as a Kauri tree. This stump had an irregular, naturally formed breakage, with the remaining trunk standing no more than 2 or 3 feet tall off the ground. The stump had no foliage, and yet it wasn't rotting, it wasn't soft with decay, it was alive. The researchers were surprised and curious as to what was going on, so they set up monitors in the tree stump and in nearby trees so as to get a better picture of what was going on. For example, they monitored water flow in the trees, and they were able to find a pretty unique pattern. During the day, when the sun was out, the nearby trees would be turgid with water, as they were actively engaging in transpiration and photosynthesis under the warm glare of the sun. But in the Kauri stump, there was no water flow. Now, in the evening and early in the nighttime, the unbroken trees would slow and eventually stop their rate of transpiration. There's no sunlight to evaporate water, which is one of the motive forces that pulls water up the vasculature of the tree. And so when the sun goes away and the transpiration stops, the water will drain from their roots. But in so doing, these nearby unbroken trees seem to have fed water right into the roots of the stump, and even pushed it up into the stump itself, keeping it alive by hydrating it at night. This raises the question, are the root systems of these different trees somehow connected? In the study, the researchers talk about grafting, where one root merges with another. The root tissue becomes connected and integrated, and can then exchange resources like water and mineral nutrients. This happens between the roots of a single individual tree quite frequently, but it can also occur between different individuals of the same species, and even different individuals of different species. The researchers say, quote, "Several hypotheses trying to explain this trait have been put forth, ranging from evolutionary neutrality, increased resistance to wind throw, improved water and nutrient exploitation, all the way to a parasitic nature of the phenomenon. However, there is no consensus, and natural root grafting may have evolved several times for different reasons. The question as to the adaptive value of intraspecific root grafting becomes more challenging yet when one of the grafted individuals is a leafless tree stump." Unquote. The researchers point out how this mechanism of water transport in the leafless stump is novel, it's new to science, and it's not well understood. The root system of the stump would have developed these grafting connections when it was still an unbroken tree, but the researchers wanted to know why these connections remained after the tree was broken down into a little stump that was incapable of generating sugars, and thus incapable of giving back to the other trees that indirectly keep it alive. They suggest that maybe connecting to the stump's roots stabilized the other trees in the soil, or that maybe by tapping into the stump's roots, the unbroken trees could effectively expand their own root systems and increase their access to nutrients. This is what the researchers called improved water and nutrient exploitation. Although the fact that the trees near the stump showed no significant increase in size or foliage would be evidence that doesn't support this hypothesis. Perhaps there are forest-wide benefits to having an interconnected root system, like some kind of nutrient welfare program that keeps every tree in the community alive. The researchers have a little joke about this. They call this interconnected forest root system the, quote, wood wide web, unquote. However, the researchers also noted that this interconnection of the roots made the entire community more susceptible to sharing pathogens. This further complicates the evolutionary origin of these interconnecting roots, because it would seem that sharing pathogens would provide evolutionary pressure that would discourage the emergence of root interconnections. This is also an issue of more immediate concern, especially for the Kauri trees, as these Kauri trees of New Zealand are suffering from Kauri dieback disease, which is an ailment caused by the fungus-like pathogen Phytophthora agathodicida. Back on the topic of the interconnected root systems and the water flow between them, the researchers say, quote, below-ground carbon trading among trees has been shown in the past, but if our admittedly limited data on hydraulic coupling among trees can be confirmed, we might have to revise our general understanding of forest ecosystems as communal superorganisms, unquote. If you're not quite sold on the superorganism terminology yet, then just try this. When they're talking about water flow and water hydraulics, connecting all of the trees and perhaps aiding somehow in sharing nutrients between them to keep them all alive, this is quite similar to all of the different cells and tissues in an animal's body being connected together and supplied nutrients through the vascular system, through the blood. These interconnected roots are the forest's vasculature, and the mineral nutrient-rich water flowing through the roots is like the blood of the forest.